Hi, this is Michael Quinn from Form Kitchens, and welcome to Trading Ideas. This is a podcast where we have conversations with interesting people in the design and build industry, people who are really trying to move this whole industry forward. Today, we had the good fortune of talking to Adam and Justin from Further Architecture, which is a remote studio that they started during the pandemic. This conversation is really about how do you start a net new venture, particularly in today's digital age. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. We look forward to bringing you more interesting dialogue with people in this industry. Well, today we're joined by Adam Wagner and Justin Towert of Further, formerly Vessel Architecture. And I'm excited to get into this conversation today because they've both had super interesting careers in this industry and have launched an awesome studio that really started at the beginning of the pandemic and is a remote studio. And I think they have a lot of great insights to share about really what it's taken to build that business. So I want to kick it over to you two by first just hearing how you got started in this industry and how you two met and how Further kind of came to fruition.
So this will be a test in our partnership right here of who answers first and how we share this question. I'll let Justin go.
Yeah, you let me go? Okay. Yeah, so you want me to share kind of how we met, Michael?
Sure, that's a great place to start. And if you want to fold in a little
long interview, if he has to repeat every question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Adam and I met in New Haven, Connecticut, a number of years ago, and Adam was at grad school there, and I was working at a firm in town, and I think just became friends actually through our church, and met a few other people that way. A sort of close, tight knit community of, at that time, sort of just starting out, either in the field of architecture or going to grad school at Yale or whatever. And so, what do you think, Adam? Probably five or 10 guys that we were kind of close with that, on occasion we'd get drinks and dinner, or breakfast or whatever, and just kind of get to know one another. New Haven is a really transitional to college town, and a lot of architecture firms there. I think the per capita number of architects in that town is like the highest in the country, maybe next to Boston or something. So, but yeah, we connected there and stayed in touch, and we can share the story of how we started, but that's really how we met.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to your question about backgrounds, we were fairly similar in that we were kind of graduated high school about the same time. And I went to Kansas State University for architecture. Justin went to Penn State for architecture. And we both graduated around like 2009, 2008 in the recession there. And so I think hitting our careers at that point was sort of different. I got a commission from my vegetarian uncle, to do a hot dog restaurant in Wichita, Kansas, with my wife. And so my wife and I started a firm when we were 23 and knew absolutely nothing, and did that for a few years. And so that kind of was how I started, as always, kind of having a firm and being a sort of principal with not much knowledge, and bouncing around from Kansas, then to the Netherlands for a few years, where she went to school, and then I went to school at Yale with Justin, and then went to Mexico City to work a little bit, and then have moved to Denver and worked here. And I think in that time period between when we knew each other in New Haven, we'd kept up, but we had a third mutual friend who really called us out and said, "Hey, the three of us should start a firm here." And I don't think Justin and I would have necessarily started a firm together.
No.
But this third guy that we were both kind of closest with, he pulled us together, Kyle, and with this idea that it'd be a design and development firm. And so we talked about that, I don't know what, 4 years, something. And then the pandemic hit, things got kind of mixed up, and it was finally kind of time for Justin and I to go do this, and so we started it, and Kyle still hasn't joined us full time, but so it's been an interesting kind of how a firm starts, where we wouldn't have necessarily planned that together, but we were brought together, and our skill sets are really complementary, and bringing something together that's, I think, stronger than either one of us independently. But then it's also created this thing that's remote, which I think that was the biggest concern for us of starting a firm. But then the pandemic hit, and kind of everyone was working remote, and so it seemed a little bit less daunting. And then that's kind of all we've known.
Yeah. And I think to bounce off that too, like that I started work in 2008 at a firm in New Haven, and worked there for a while, and I think I think I probably worked about 13 years or so before Adam and I, officially joined up and started this firm. And as Adam said, like his career was very sort of like nuanced and varied, and he popped around a lot more, and lots of experiences, lots of places. I'm sure he'll share, but he's lived lots of places during that time. And for me, I was a bit more entrenched in two firms in particular, but I think one of the things that was really valuable during that time was the ability to kind of ask, is this actually what I want to do? So for me, when Adam was at grad school at Yale, I met him, like I said, through our church, but I was actually considering a career shift into graphic design, and was getting a master's at the same time through school in Georgia called SCAD.
Mm-hmm.
And as life does, it takes twists and turns, and you sort of say, is this a good fit? Is this a good fit? And I think when the pandemic hit, which we could get into, I had really sort of come to a place where I was like, you know what, there's so much I love about architecture, and I want to make this work. So got to figure out how can we do that together.
But I think it is really interesting because the profession is so hard, and it's so, I talked to so many architects that it's a difficult thing, and you can kind of do this narrow, small path that's the sort of accepted path, or you're getting off and doing these other things. And it's interesting how Justin sort of had that, he was doing that narrow path, and then he had almost this little crisis of, do I even want to be an architect? And I think he really got invigorated with a project in Thailand, I believe, that he might go into, but and it really kind of brought him back, that passion to architecture. But I've been sort of straight within architecture my whole career, and he's kind of gone off and done these other professions and things. But then he's definitely the more well-rounded architect, and like kind of architect that I rely on for a lot of our things that we need to do. So it's interesting kind of those different paths and how they interweave and what you kind of end up with.
There are like 1,000 questions I want to ask coming off of all that, but I want to understand, like, what was that tipping point? Because you said things like, in hindsight, it didn't even seem like we were going to business together. Justin, you're having sort of this existential thing of like, do I even want to be in this discipline? And then the world kind of gets turned upside down in 2020. Like, what was that tipping point of like, hey, let's do it? Because everything you said seems like it wouldn't indicate that you would do it. But like, what was that tipping point? What made you say, hey, I think we're ready to start this?
Yeah, no, that's great. And it sort of brings up this like more meta question, almost an existential question of like, when you look back, let's say we're like 70, 80 and we've lived that long and we've had careers. You look back, and I imagine we sort of wonder like, how much of that did I plan versus how much was I reacting and responding to what happens in life, right? But so there's always some like percentage there. But I think the bottom line was I got laid off at the very beginning of the pandemic, which was a huge blessing in disguise for a number of reasons. My wife got really sick, and so I needed to care for her and our kids. But that was really a huge blessing, because I think I tend to be a little bit risk averse. And if you ask my wife, she'd be nodding her head yes. My wife's been she knows me well, and she's been kicking me out the door to start my own practice since she met me.
And his work wife right here.
And Adam, yeah. So, and Adam, Kyle, and I, the three of us have been talking for years, strategizing, planning, and again, it's always sort of that like, well, what's the right time? How do you know when? And for us, we just didn't know when. And then for me, it was like, well, I guess this is the right time, and it really was the right time after taking a little bit of time off to care for my family. So there was really no planning involved, no strategic planning. Be like, we're going to wait for a really bad crisis, a national and international crisis, and then we're going to start. It wasn't like that at all. It was just like, well, yeah, this is the time. So,
well, yeah, I mean, to that point, because this is the third firm I started in. So like, I did it once with my wife, and then 3 years ago, I was tired of a firm, quit, started my own firm. Kind of like, okay, Justin, like, come over, but he still wasn't ready, and I got like lonely and went and worked for another firm after that. And so it's kind of like, come on, Justin, come on. And so it really took the pandemic and him getting furloughed, which was a sort of blessing, which I was like, okay, I'm ready too. Let's do it. And then it was this great thing where, he was still on kind of furlough pay and allowed him to kind of build up our portfolio and build up our website and do all these things where there wasn't quite as much pressure, in the beginning of having to get work. But then we sort of just randomly were picking up projects as I was kind of transitioning out of the firm and Justin was starting it up. So in that sense, it worked really well.
Yeah, I think that like highlighted too, it was really important for me to like feel, and again, maybe this is my risk averse nature or whatever, but like I wanted to feel like I had hit that 10,000 hour sort of mark, but in a way that like jived with the kind of work I really wanted to be doing in the future, which to me was like a pretty high bar. And so I just wanted to make sure like, hey, do I have what I need to do this? And I don't think you ever really fully feel like you do, but
yeah,
I was working at two great studios that the design quality was really high. And so I just wanted to make sure I learned as much as I could before I got out of there. So.
What did day one?
Okay, what are we on? Like number two of your question? Two of 10 now here?
So I've got 4 hours set aside for this. So, no, I'm kidding.
Good.
What did day one look like? Like, so circumstances kind of forced your hand, and now it's happening. What does day one look like? Was it like, hey, what's our point of view here? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we just trying to get some sort of project? I mean, what did that look like, the start of it all?
Yes. So it was pretty organic, and really like it was not as if we had a day on the calendar where we pointed to it and said, okay, now we're going to be, together from this point on. The transition period for me was what I actually tell some people that want to start their own studios is an interesting way to do it. But I did some freelance consulting work for another, studio in Litchfield, Connecticut that does high-end modern work. And so I kind of used that as a launching point where they were totally, fine with, they knew we were starting something up, and that gave us a little bit of financial runway and freedom to not feel like we needed to have enough revenue coming in on day one to like pay 2 salaries. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it kind of started that way. And then as we got more and more projects, eventually Adam is probably about a year in or so from that, where we were building up enough work, and then we sort of together kind of jumped on full time.
Yeah, it is kind of foggy. I mean, I think it was like a transition between when Justin was furloughed, like in kind of March, essentially, of 2020. And then I think I quit my job probably August. But then we got a house commission maybe like around June or something as well. So he was doing that, and I was kind of helping out a little bit. So it was this slow transition. Yeah.
And when did you feel like we've got traction? We've got something going here.
Yesterday?
That's so funny. Yesterday. Yeah.
That's you know that scene in It's a Wonderful Life? They take that little dollar bill and they put it in the little safe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. No, we did just get our biggest contract yet signed yesterday. So a project we're really excited about. So, but I mean, I think, I think we did great the first year. I mean, financially and project wise, uh, I'd say that the goal is to, we get projects coming in, and a lot of it's from word of mouth or relationships or things like that. And I think the goal is to get projects in because of your body of work and what you do, and less about sort of who you know, or
Hmm.
uh, whose cousin knows that you're an architect and has a project or something like that. Not not that we don't want those, but I think that we're getting a shift more now, and clients coming to us for what we do, and not just kind of who we know,
Well,
which is
well,
nice.
I'd love to kind of dig into that because it feels like there's like I think they call it a cold start problem, right? Where you're sort of known for your body of work, but how do you develop a body of work if you don't, And so, what's it like figuring out that cold start problem when, I mean, obviously you have your CVs and your previous work, but now you're this new thing. How do you build a body of work without a body of work?
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that was just the great position that Justin was in, where he was able to build up a lot of good theoretical projects of kind of where we wanted to be, and he rendering them and drawing them really well, in a way we could start putting that out. And we've continued to do that with making theoretical projects that don't necessarily have a client yet, but saying like, hey, here's who we are, here's what we want to be, and
Hmm.
here's what we can do. Because it is really hard, just to be able to do the work that you have, and it's very easy to get stuck in being known for that. And so to be able to carve out enough time and energy to create something that points to that direction, that was our goal, and we would have mostly accomplished that so far.
Yeah, I would say too that like it's a little for me especially, but I think for both of us, it's like really pretty separated from um, will this get us? I mean, we always want. It's always exciting when people reach out to us because they think the more theoretical stuff we do is interesting. But I think we both, one of the reasons why we met and one of the visions that we have for this company is we want to create space for people to explore ideas that have
Mm.
real impact in the world, and not
Hmm.
just like creating beautiful architecture, but like, hey, how do we solve bigger problems, bigger issues? We're trained as design thinkers. We want to be able to make space for that, and that's really how I think that body of work started, like that cold start problem. It wasn't so much, um, we want to create a really beautiful portfolio of work, but it was more like, hey, we have so many ideas. We're both big ideators, big thinkers, and like how can we leverage that for now? But like, moving forward, we really want to create a space um, where everyone in the company, as we grow and as we expand and hire, hopefully soon, that's one of the things that draws people to us is like, hey, this is a really interesting space to work where you can explore other ideas as well.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What are those problems you want to take on? You're saying it's more than just a beautiful portfolio. You see yourselves having this ability to have impact. Where do you want to have impact?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I mean, I can answer for myself. I don't know if we have one unified answer yet, but I think we do. We talk about this a lot, but our long term goal is to fold in development work, and through our third partner, but then additionally to create a space where we're doing work that's traditionally pro bono, for clients and folks in need who maybe are in a developing nation, or an organization maybe that's a nonprofit that doesn't have the ability to pay market rate architecture fees. And so we really see part of the revenue, not only from the architecture side, but especially the development side, as really funding our ability to do that work, which we think has like equal equal value and equal dignity to all the work that we do here, and doesn't always get, doesn't always
Yeah.
get that kind of play.
Our kind of secret goal a little bit is to kind of like Robin Hood this a little bit, where we're kind of working at high end scales and fees and working with development in a way that they can kind of act as an engine in some ways for a more research and design kind of arm and pro bono arm that we can be putting that back into. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just like look at the news last week, right? Like this massive,
Yeah.
massive earthquake, and I'm like listening to the news in the morning. I'm like, what can I do? Like as an architect, I mean, I
Yeah.
know that you can safety assessments, etc. But like, and that's where for us, like, sometimes we've had a few, over the course of our careers, we've had a number of projects that we've been involved with, and they just come along through relationships or through whatever. And I think the point we're trying to make is like we just want to be open to them when they
Hmm.
do come, and we want to actually be able to like do something meaningful in responding to them, as opposed to like saying no, sorry, like that's not what we do or whatever.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think, just running an architecture firm and a profitable architecture firm is so difficult, and it takes so much effort. And, it's so hard to be able to be allowed that margin to be able to
Yeah.
think and help and do other things. And so I think our goal is to try to really figure out that business model that allows us that margin, and this sort of employee base that allows that too.
Yeah, I mean that's what I love so much about business building is particularly in this sort of stage as you're getting off the ground is you kind of have to be both in the clouds and in the dirt because you got to think about how do we ensure success
Yeah.
today so we can go after those bigger ambitions we have over the 3, 5, 7 year time horizon. And so when you think about that and when you think about kind of ensuring success today so you can do all the amazing things you all want to accomplish, what are the big challenges in this new context, whether it is a remote studio or people turning to digital tools and experiences, or I don't know, maybe it's new systems or processes or materials? Like, what are the challenges you all feel like you're solving on a day-to-day basis to ensure that success today? That maybe is different than when you and your wife were designing a hot dog stand in Kansas. Like, do things feel different now? Are the challenges different?
I mean, that's a pretty big question. I
Yeah.
think that one aspect of that is just the connectivity you can have, compared to when we started up in '09, and the sort of like net thinking about firms as more of a network of people. And just Justin and I working remotely, it allows us to be in multiple markets pretty easily,
Mm-hmm.
in one sense. But then thinking about how we engage different consultants around the world for different tasks, and then we've been talking to different kind of firms and people about different types of relationships. Where here in Denver, there's a lot of small kind of 1-2 people firms, and talking to them about like just like, hey, how do I do this, or who's a good structural engineer for this or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about possibly kind of merging it in that way, versus then we've even been kind of talking or contacted by kind of larger firms like 100-person firms who are saying, hey, we're getting beat out by these 3,000 people firms on projects, and talking about possibly creating a kind of umbrella firm where smaller people can come and help them fill
Mm.
gaps, but then we smaller firms then can then kind of leverage their portfolio to go after bigger projects. And so none of that has really sparked into a fire yet, but I think there's a bunch of these little conversations going on about sort of how can people help each other, and how can you leverage experience and knowledge in different ways. uh, yeah.
It sounds like the connectivity piece has opened up more possibility. Is kind of what I'm taking away from that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think that kind of gets into like what's been successful so far in our partnership. Like, any partnership has challenges. It's like a relationship, and so there are definitely challenges there. But I think one of the big successes is Adam's really, really good at connecting. I mean, I'm sure you know that by now, Michael.
Yeah.
You don't start a podcast unless you have that sort of DNA, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
that is not as much my DNA. I'm more the like, I don't even know how to. I'll let you describe that, Adam. But I think I think that like what makes us work is, um, uh, yeah, Adam, like that aspect of a remote studio, you know, for me, I think would be challenging, but I think Adam like makes that very doable and exciting because we have, yeah, like we're leveraging, you know, we have consultants we work with all over the country, and in some cases, in halfway across the globe, all over the world, and so I think the time difference is tightening up a good bit just because of technology, and I really think that, you know, architecture as an industry and the design process, there are a lot of firm principles, especially of an older generation, that are very had a really difficult time with the transition to remote work in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, that's where, like, you know, the firm I was in, that's why the layoffs and furloughs happened. So I think that we're trying to figure out like how do we make this work in a way that doesn't compromise the integrity of the design process, because you're, you know, that's true. Like it's great to be able to sit down with somebody, sketch ideas out, you know, and so we have to use technology now to figure out how do we do that
Mm-hmm.
really well.
Well, to that point, you know, you've been at it for almost 3 years now. Looking back on those 3 years and thinking about the big learnings, like if you were to sit down with someone who is thinking about starting their own thing now, is there like one big piece of advice you would give them, or I don't know, two or three? I don't want to cap it at a number, but like, what's the first thing
Mm.
that comes to mind? What would you tell that person?
I mean, as like the non risk averse person, I always say just do it. Like if you have that inkling and do it, and like you need a bit of a runway, but like things normally happen and things normally come in, and you figure it out. But you know, there's always this surprising list of documents you need to fill out and people you need to hire and things like that.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's funny. Like our answer to that question is opposite.
yeah.
So mine would be don't rush it.
So
Um,
choose the answer behind door number A or B.
but I think there's wisdom in both. The reason I say don't rush it is because I've wanted to have my own studio since I was really a kid. It's been a dream of mine for a long time. I didn't go to architecture school to like work for someone else. Like I always knew that that was kind of in my bones. But I think it, you know, for me, it led to a little bit of undue frustration working for other people as long as I did. And I think that where I'm at now, like, I think that those experiences were really valuable in a lot of ways. Like it rounded me out, like Adam said, in some really important ways that I think have helped us be successful in the short amount of time we've been in business. So um, that's more advice to myself maybe than to someone else. But yeah, I think that it's difficult to know like when that time is, and I think maybe the time is different for everyone. You know what I mean? Like the time for one person to go out and start your thing might be a different time frame for a different person.
Yeah, because it's funny hearing Justin say that. Like he didn't go to architecture school to work for someone, and because I felt the same way, and I literally went right out of school and didn't work for anybody, you know, and I like worked for myself. Like the situation arose in a different way. Um, but you know, we'll be talking about a task, and I'll say I don't know how to do that, and he'll say, "Well, what would you do if like we weren't partners?" And I was like, "I would just make sure I partner with somebody who knew how to do that." You know, like that's my mindset of, you know, I don't know everything, and like there's going to be somebody to fill in the gap. And you know that leads to frustrations in certain ways because Justin has put in the hard work under you know people and rounded himself out in that way. Um, that's why I partnered with him.
Yeah, yeah, and no, and that's really like any partnership. Like you can see the strengths that we sort of bring to each other. We both love the like front end part of design,
Mm-hmm.
right? The coming up with ideas and creating compelling design and all that stuff. But I think we're learning, you know, well, what is, you know, the full process of owning a business is so huge. It's so much more than that. So like just trying to figure out like, okay, I think, you know, given how you're wired, like it makes a lot more sense for you to kind of own this area and then for me to own this area and that sort of thing. We're not the traditional like one's business, one's design. Like we
Mhm.
both came at this from a deep love of design, and so we're trying to figure that out. How do we allocate those roles?
Why the name Further?
You want me to take that, Adam?
Yeah, you take it.
Yeah, I love the name. I think
It's a cool name.
further kind of further kind of speaks to something I think that's kind of deep in both of us. We love pushing. Uh, we just love pushing things further, to be a little on the nose about it. But I think a little bit deeper than that, we love to respond to questions and prompts that are given to us from clients in ways that even surprise us. So if the
Mm.
constraints are, hey, this is a really small, we don't have a big budget on this one, like, and even like it's a really small project, or the constraint is, hey, we've got this existing house that's like, pretty cookie cutter, like, can you guys come up with something interesting here? We love we love that process of taking those constraints and pushing them further and turning them upside down and turning them around and figuring out, hey, how can we think outside the box here, as it relates to what we do. And then I think we also, as we shared earlier, have kind of a larger dream longer term of
Yeah.
creating something that's maybe a bit of a healthier work environment for employees, but then also has a bigger impact in the world. Um, Aside from just like, hey, we just, got a huge commission. Now we can buy ourselves sports cars or something. I mean, that's not our dream. And so we want to create we needed a name that could sort of like hold the larger aspirations we had, but also could speak to the sort of day to day of like what we do, what makes us a little different maybe from other architecture firms.
Yeah, and just how do we further the profession of architecture? How do we further equity? How do we further you know the way things are done? How do we it's kind of a challenge and a reminder to us, I think, and
Hmm.
that's the goal of it. But it came from a list of about 3,000 names that we have been working on for 6 years.
There was a stretch in my career where I worked for a branding agency that specialized in naming. So I
Hmm.
literally named brands for 3 years. So, uh,
Really? I
Man, we
I,
wish
should
we
get
had known
look
that
you up.
about you,
Yeah, I
Michael.
know. Huh.
yeah, but Further, it's an incredible name when you think about what you all are trying to do. It supports, I think, every part of your ambition. So it's cool. I love it.
Thanks.
Well, before we wrap, and this has been an awesome conversation. Adam, you and I got connected through your podcast, Architecting. I'd love just to hear a bit more about that and spread the word on architecting to our audience. So if you could just tell us a bit about architecting and why that came to be.
Yeah, thanks, and yeah, and thanks for Form's support of us as well. It's been really nice. You know, for me, like Justin said, I just really love connecting with people. And when I moved to Denver, I was able to set up a bunch of coffee dates with architecture firms that I really loved, and was able to check in with people, and it was awesome. But then I had to get a job, and then there's not much opportunity to kind of do that again. And I teach at the university here, and so I was able to bring some people in and kind of do reviews and things like that. Um, but it was actually sort of a few weeks before the pandemic hit when I did my first episode, uh, and just following up on that desire of hey, like I want to hang out. I see you, Mr. Architect over here, that I really love their work and love what they're doing, and I was starting to think about moving on with Justin too, and so I'm like, let's get advice. Let me get your story, and and then just recording that, and I think it's been such a amazing learning thing for me. Of now we're at episode 53, I think, and so like, and they're about an hour and a half, so however 75 hours of hearing people's advice on starting a firm and their life has been just really great. And then the bigger thing was just that I felt like Colorado architecture community was fairly siloed, and people kind of knew of each other, or maybe they didn't, of these amazing architects who don't know each other. And we're in a small enough place that I didn't think that should be happening. So using this as a device to kind of connect people and just to document people's lives. I was sort of fine if no one listened to it, and this was turned into an archive that, like, in 50 years you could go back and see who designed that building and what were they thinking, what were their struggles. And so now, I mean, I'm happy people have been listening, and it's been building a nice community here, and we're moving into kind of more live events and more happy hours and things to get people connecting physically. But people are asking me, like, what are you going to do when you run out of Colorado architects? And I've got a list of 70 people I'm trying to get to. There's a lot of people doing good work with a lot of good experiences out there that a lot of the national architecture design podcasts aren't going to hit. And so just thinking about how do you do a local real dive on local people and community. So
well, the episodes are fantastic, and you've actually inspired me to do this and go out and have conversations. And it's incredible what happens when you just sit down for 20 or 30 minutes and just start picking people's brains. And I think, frankly, I've learned so much from the conversations you've had, and that's what these conversations are about, right? Just pulling out interesting insights and sharing it with people. So what's the best way for people to check out Architecting?
So you can search for Architecting on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get podcasts. So it's just architect-ing. And then there's architect-ing.com is our website, or Architecting Stories on Instagram.
I'm glad we collided.
I know.
And I'm glad bigger circumstances made further possible for you two. And I'm excited to see where it goes. I think your ambitions are amazing, and I hope you get to realize those. But really appreciate you two taking the time today and sharing your story and sharing some advice. And we're excited to see what Further does.
Well, yeah, thanks. I mean, this is cool that you're doing this, and I love it. That there can't be too many conversations like this, I think, and it's been awesome grabbing coffee with you next door every once in a while, and seeing what the kind of different way that Forum is going about creating kitchens and how you're designing it, and it's cool. So thanks for having us on.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thanks, Mike.
Of course.